Sentiment may be forgiven in a mother, but not in a regent, and never in a king. Rogar Baratheon to Alyssa Velaryon, fire and blood, a surfeit of rulers. The secret wedding of King Jaehaerys and Queen Alysanne was more than just a normal marriage. While none could doubt the love and affection between the pair, one thing this match did allow was Jaehaerys to stamp his own authority in a way that he had thus far been unable to do given his age. He managed to wrangle some control over his overcautious mother and over-ambitious hand of the king, who would use his position ostensibly for the good of the crown and the wider realm, but in reality expanding his and his own house's grip on power. While the king made the first move in this political war, Rogar Baratheon was not the sort of man to let such affronts to his position go unanswered. After the confrontation at the gates of Dragonstone, after the marriage had already been done, the Hand and the Queen Regent had made their departure with haste. The king and his young bride closed the castle gates and returned to the peaceful solitude of their chambers. Dragonstone would remain their place of peace and refuge, and their residence for the remainder of Jaehaerys' minority, until a time came where he had no need of regents, and could take the rule of the Seven Kingdoms of Westeros into his own hands. It is written that during this time, the young king and queen were seldom apart, sharing in every meal, talking to each other late into the night of the green days of their childhood, and the challenges that lie ahead for them. They fished and hawked together, mingling with the island's small folk in the dockside inns and villages, reading to one another from dusty leather-bound tomes they found in the castle's library, taking lessons together from Dragonstone's maester. For we still have much to learn, Alysanne is said to have reminded her husband, praying beside Septon Oswick. They flew together as well, many times, all around the Dragon Mount, and often even as far as Driftmark, and the seat of their uncle Daemon Velaryon, the very man some suspected might have been the person to alert Alysanne of her mother and stepfather's plan to marry her to Oren Baratheon. If dubious servants' tales are to be believed, especially given the reliability of the source, it is said that the king and his queen slept naked and shared many long and lingering kisses, both publicly and in private, abed and at the table, and at many other times throughout the day, yet, curiously, never consummated their union, an act that would make it unbreakable in the eyes of the likes of Rogar Baratheon. Another year and a half would pass before Jaehaerys and Alysanne chose to finally consummate their marriage. Whenever lords and council members travelled to Dragonstone, to the king's island of peace and solitude, to consult with the young king, as they would do from time to time, Jaehaerys received them in the chamber of the painted table, where his grandfather had once planned his very conquest of Westeros, and like Aegon, with Rhaenys and Visenya at his side, Alysanne was ever his shadow. Aegon had no secrets from Rhaenys and Visenya, and I have none from Alysanne, he said. Though it might have been there was no secrets between them during these bright days, in the morning of their marriage, their very union itself remained a closely guarded secret to most in Westeros, on fear of the reaction of the faith and their most devout and pious followers. There might have been even some hope from Queen Alyssa and Lord Rogar that this match could be undone before the news of it spread, despite Jaehaerys' warnings to the contrary. However, at this stage they had no means of implementing any plans. But there was still a long while till Jaehaerys came of age, and plenty of time to plot and scheme. Upon their return to King's Landing, Lord Rogar instructed all those that had accompanied them to Dragonstone to never speak word of what had transpired there, if they wished to keep their tongues. Nor was any announcement made to the realm at large. When Septon Mathias, who had been so brutally put down by King Jaehaerys, attempted to send word of the match to the High Septon, and the most devout in Oldtown, Grand Maester Benefer, burnt his letter rather than dispatch a raven, on orders from the Hand. It's not clear if Septon Mathias faced any punishment for his actions and disobedience. Actions Rogar Baratheon could very well have perceived and interpreted as treasonous. all I did and all I tried to do was for the good of the realm and the Iron Throne. The motivations of Rogar Baratheon. Fire and blood. A surfeit of rulers. There was a ticking clock hanging over the smoky island of Dragonstone in the murky waters of Blackwater Bay, slowly counting down to the day Jaehaerys came of age and could rule Westeros in his own right, without the need of regents and lord protectors. A ticking clock marked the waning of the power held by Lord Rogar Baratheon and his time as Hand of the King. Once a man holds the very powers of a king, it is very hard for them to hand them back and return to the old selves they were before. The downfall of many regents and stewards in the centuries prior to Aegon's conquest came as they tried to hold on to their power, powers that were never rightly theirs to begin with, but powers they had become accustomed to. Commonly, the first move for a regent would be to try and marry a daughter to the king in question, ensuring their place at the monarch's side, safe in the knowledge their grandchild would one day wear the crown and sit the throne. The trouble for Rogar Baratheon is he had no children of his own. He had no sisters, and while some of his brothers did indeed have children, they were too young to marry the king. Thus, this course of action was not possible in abating his slowly falling influence. The Lord of Storm's End badly wanted and needed more time. More than his waning power, the Hand was more so angry at the disrespect he felt the king had shown him at Dragonstone, especially considering the ungrateful king would not even have a head, let alone a throne, if Rogar had not taken him and his mother in when they fled from Maegor the Cruel, risking his own head in the process. Not only that, Rogar was the very first of the lords to stand beside the king publicly and declare for him. Without Rogar, without the power of House Baratheon, Jaehaerys would either be dead or running from the grips of Maegor the Cruel somewhere in far-off Essos. In Rogar's view, the king owed him his very life. Rogar was a man unaccustomed to defeat, so remained determined to find a way to part the young king and queen, Jaehaerys and Alysanne. So long as their marriage remained unconsummated, he believed a chance, a glimmer of a chance, remained. Best then to keep the wedding a secret, so it might be undone without anyone being the wiser. Rogar Baratheon had the typical blue eyes and black hair of House Baratheon, and wore a thick black beard, muscled like a bull. But he was a lot more politically astute than much of his kin, wanting to grow the power base and respect for the very still new House Baratheon. A House Baratheon that had yet to step from the shadow of the Durrandon kings of Storm's End before them. Rogar was a proud man, admired for his courage and boldness, respected for his strength, and feared for his skilled arms and military ability. He was known to be generous as well as fierce, and was unaccustomed to losing. Possessing a strong martial temperament, Rogar was often described as a warrior to the very core, and approached all matters of his life in such manner. He enjoyed hawking, hunting, gambling, drinking, feasting, and though he held little regard for mummers, once remarking they were of yet less use than a monkey, Rogar was not a man inclined to surrender, frequently boasting in battle that he would never set down his axe while life remained in him. Although King Jaehaerys valued Rogar as a counsellor and a friend, the young king believed in his own judgment, intellect, and temperament to surpass those of the Lord of Storm's End. Despite his conduct during his final years as Hand of the King, Rogar was neither cruel nor evil at heart, nor was he a fool, which makes his next course of action even more questionable, and his motives truly unclear. I am the Queen Regent until my son shall come of age. All of you serve at my pleasure, including the Hand, Alyssa Velaryon, to the small council. Fire and blood, a surfeit of rulers. It wasn't just the Hand of the King who felt like this. So did his wife, the mother of the troublesome royal children, Queen Regent Alyssa Velaryon. Queen Alyssa desperately wanted time as well, though for a different reason altogether than Rogar, and his more prideful nature. What is done, she had said at the gates of Dragonstone, and it is true that she did believe it to be so at the time, but she was still deeply haunted by the memories of the bloodshed of the incestuous marriage of her elder children Rhaena and Aegon. It was always on her mind and crept into her dreams most night. She had yet to find some way to make certain the events would not repeat themselves the same way when it came to Jaehaerys and Alysanne, and she viewed it foolish. She wanted to ensure that history would not repeat. She began to put in motion her own plans, plots and schemes, ideas, to try and find a way to undo the marriage of her children before the match itself was consummated. Alyssa and Rogar's actions over the next year would go down in infamy and scandal and forever change the way Regency was viewed in Westeros. But all the while the Game of Thrones played out in the background, she and her lord husband still had a realm to rule and keep it running day to day for the best part of the next year, until the king finally reached his 16th name day and took power by his own right. And so matters stood in Westeros as the year of the three brides came to an end and gave way to a new year, the 50th year since Aegon's conquest. While 49 AC had been eventful and full of politics and scandals, the events of the first few months of 50 AC and the political ramifications from them would make the year of the three brides pale in comparison.